Yeah, I appreciate you having us. I did one last night, did a couple last week, so certainly going through working my way through the county. But really, as mentioned, I'm Rob Maddox. I'm the Director of Financial Aid at St. Mary's College of Maryland. This is really going to be about kind of an overall an overview, so to speak, of the process. A great place to begin and what you should be thinking about at this point. So as I put myself into my presentation here. Really just thinking about the process, next steps, what you can be doing now before you really get into the full application process, and then, of course, what it all means and how it all comes together towards the end. The types of aid, what some of the nomenclature means, and how it impacts aid awarding, and what students may be eligible to receive. And then, of course, anything unusual that we can take into account, we certainly will. And so, talking a little bit about that as well. And as mentioned, if there are any questions, please throw them in the chat. I will keep up with them as best as I can. If I don't get to it kind of within the presentation, we'll certainly come back to those at the end and answer those questions for you as well. But the idea of financial aid is really anything that's there for you to cover post-secondary educational expenses. And so it can be really anything from these kind of five main entities of where financial aid comes from. The federal government is the single largest supplier of financial aid right now. The state of Maryland has some great programs for students, as well as colleges and universities and what they have to offer students, and then private sources that students can go out and apply for. And then the last thing you'll see there are the employers. And so that is something that we won't talk much about because that is going to really be up to you, either the parent or the student, going and reaching out to your human resources office to see what may be available to you. It may be some tuition reimbursement, tuition remission, whatever the case may be, to allow you to assist in covering some of those educational costs for you. But really going out and checking with the HR office is going to be really up to you to see what's available to you. So really diving into the application process, the very first thing you can do now, even though the FAFSA is not open yet for this year, is get your FSA ID if you do not have one already. If you are a parent that has done this before and has done this recently in the last couple of years, you're good to go. You have your FSA ID. I will say that with the FAFSA changes, it will likely be that both parents will need an FSA ID to sign the FAFSA form and approve the data transfer that we'll talk about from the IRS. But every single student will need one. It is their application for federal aid with parental data. So every student will need their own FSA ID. And studentaid.gov that you'll see here is a great resource for a lot of things, but specifically the FSA ID and the FAFSA form. Getting into the FSA website, really starting here and being able to get into the application itself, getting the FSA ID for both the student and the parent. It's all going to happen right here at Federal Student Aid. So really taking the time to do that now, as I mentioned. The FAFSA is typically open October 1st. Last year and this year it has been a bit delayed. There are some pretty significant changes. So right now they have promised us by December 1st the FAFSA will be open. They're conducting their second round of beta testing right now, and things have gone okay. So we should see that FAFSA open here December 1st for everybody. That way you can get your FSA IDs and get enrolled now. And then as soon as that FAFSA application does open, you can jump in and get that completed. It is a form that is kind of a basic demographic information form. It's going to collect the same information from everyone for the most part, but it must be on file to be eligible for any of the federal state programs, excuse me, federal financial aid programs, many of the state programs, and a lot of institutional and outside programs as well. And it will be something that you will continue to file. And so next October, barring any significant issues for the 26-27 year and so forth. And so you're going to file this every single year. And it is something that with the kind of a major change that went into play last year with the new law, with the FAFSA and federal student aid, is that the student will begin the process. They will log in first. They will start filling out the FAFSA. They'll input all of their information. And at that point, once they have completed their section, we'll invite the parent to complete their section. So there's no what they call single view of the application at this point. And so that email that will come will invite you to put your information in to the FAFSA. And so this is kind of what it looks like from their side. That way, they'll have the information they need. They'll know what they'll have to have on hand. As you can see there, name, date of birth, social security number, email address, that kind of stuff, to be sure that they're the correct person that is going in and filling out the FAFSA form. The FAFSA itself, it's there and collects all this information to generate the student aid index. This is one of the changes. They went from something called an expected family contribution to a student aid index to hopefully make it a bit easier for families to estimate their aid eligibility. And the most significant, I think, update to the FAFSA was this idea of the IRS data exchange, where it literally was an act of Congress in which they were able to connect the FAFSA to the IRS. So families will be using this process to move that information directly over from the IRS into the FAFSA form to put in and fill in those fields there. And so that invite will allow you to do that. The authorization of that transfer information is why both parents would need an FSA ID, because they will have to authorize that information if it's a joint return. If it's separate returns, then it'll have to be kind of combined. But going through that process, both parents are going to have to say, yes, I agree, this is fine. Please move this information over for us. If you are in a combined household, separated or divorced parents, whatever the case may be, the parent of record is the parent who supplied the most financial support to the student throughout the year. It is no longer the parent that the student lived with the most. So that can be a little bit tricky, but it is up to you, the parents, to kind of figure that out. Obviously, if both biological parents are in the household, that makes it pretty easy. It's going to be their information. If parents are divorced or separated, then whoever supplies the most financial support, and within that household, it will include any biological or step parents on the FAFSA for that filing. Once that IRS information is brought over for that parent of record, you're not going to be able to adjust anything. You won't be able to make any changes, and in most cases, you're not going to be able to see much of the information that's there, but it will tell you that you have done it correctly and it has been ported over properly. And I will say a negative change that happened this past year is the so-called multi-child or multi-student discount. It does not impact the SAI calculation for the number of children or dependents that you have in college at the same time. Now, I will say the FAFSA, the FAFSA calculation was adjusted to account for the fact that this won't be included any longer, but it does not split it evenly between the number of students that you have in college, unfortunately. So it really does take the time to go through and get that information in. And like I said, it's the same information for everyone. The CSS profile, you may have heard of this, is College Board's financial reporting tool. It is a private entity that works to collect a bit more information in terms of your personal finances, equity, and things like that, investments that you may have. But the idea is that this is a supplement to the FAFSA. And so you're going to file the FAFSA everywhere. But this will be in addition to that FAFSA with a bit of additional information. It is only two private institutions that use this information to have what they call an institutional methodology to determine what institutional aid you may be eligible to receive. But it's only three here in the state of Maryland that do take that CSS profile. But their website is very simple to use. You can get in, take a look at those colleges and universities that do accept the CSS supplement to be able to be sure you have it to those schools that do take that information. There is a fee unless you qualify for the AGI threshold or the SAT waiver to submit this to those colleges and universities. And as I mentioned, it does take a little bit more information into account for those colleges to be able to use that information for the financial aid process. The colleges and universities here are St. John's, Johns Hopkins, and I always forget the third one. But they're, like I said, they're pretty easy to find there on their website. So as we're bringing all this information together how are we going to be using it really comes down to, as I mentioned, the SAI and that calculation that comes out of the FAFSA form. Everything that you put into it is accounted for, and that formula to determine what your student aid index is for that academic year. It is yours. It's going to stay the same regardless of the college, university that you're going to be attending or applying to. And it is not necessarily how much you can pay out of pocket for higher education, but is an eligibility index. That way we can determine what your eligibility for specific programs or dollars is. There's a couple of programs that we'll talk about. But the SAI is mostly based in the tax information, but it does include a little bit of additional information like tax exempt interest or untaxed portions of IRA distributions and pensions. And one of the things that it does account for are 529 plans. The 529 rule changed for this year as well. Again, a positive change, but only includes the 529 for the student that is filing the FAFSA. So if you have more than one, you used to have to count all of them, but now you only have to count the one 529 plan that you have for that student that is filing the FAFSA. So that was a significant change if a family has more than one child plan for those 529s. I will say there is a bit of a 529 loophole, if you will. If, say, a grandparent has a 529 plan, that is not included on the FAFSA form. So that is funds that are available there. So really thinking about this form as a household perspective. So anyone outside of the household, great, that those resources are there, but don't necessarily have to be accounted for on the FAFSA form. The other thing that you will exclude from this from the calculations are anything that are there for future retirement of parents. So Roth IRAs, IRAs of any kind, 401ks, pensions that are there, those are all going to be excluded from the FAFSA. They are yours as a parent for future use, and so they're not going to be accounted for in the FAFSA calculation. Now, I will say they may be accounted for in the CSS profile. As I mentioned, it digs a little bit deeper within those finances that you do have available to you in some way. But and how we're going to use all of this information. So you go through and it takes 15 to 20 minutes to plug in all the information, port the information over from the IRS, get everything in. We're really looking at it from the very beginning and how all these pieces fit together. And so one of the pieces of this calculation is what's called the cost of attendance. And this is made up of two distinct parts. The direct cost, what we're going to charge you to be a student there, and then the indirect costs, things that we know it will cost you to be a student, but we will not charge you for throughout the process. And so think books, transportation, personal expenses. We're not going to charge you for those, but we know that those come into play while you're a student. And so this is the total cost of attendance. And this is really important to understand because as you can see with the direct costs, you may know that tuitions are different everywhere. Fees are different everywhere. Housing and meal costs are going to be different. And so this cost of attendance is going to vary widely based off the kind and location of the institution or the program that you're going to be involved in. But it comes into play here when determining students' financial need. And so you have the FAFSA form, you have the information in, they've calculated your student aid index. And if you recall, we mentioned that is yours. It's going to stay the same regardless of where you're going to be attending. And that's important because those different costs of attendance are going to matter into this formula that you see in front of you. Cost of attendance minus student aid index equals demonstrated financial need. So this is not I need money for college. This is a calculation that dictates eligibility for specific programs. And so a student may have to have financial need to be eligible for need-based aid. If a student doesn't have financial need, then they'll be eligible for that non-need-based aid. And so these two distinct types of, categories of aid are based upon that prior calculation, and they fall into these kind of distinct types of aid. And so grants and scholarships being gift aid that students may receive, while self-help aid, those work programs or loan programs they'll pay back in the future, are part of that package as well. And so those grants and scholarships, typically scholarships are non-need based, grants are need based. And so if a student has financial need, they may be eligible for specific grant programs or specific work study or loan programs. Just about everybody may be eligible for specific scholarship programs if they meet that institution's criteria. So those categories of aid kind of break down into these types of aid, but it all comes back to that calculation. If a student has demonstrated financial need, what they may be eligible to receive. And so with that, where it all comes from. And so you figured out if you're eligible for need-based aid or not, and how we're going to put these packages together with the information that we have on hand. And so with the main sources, that institutional funding, we talked a little bit of grants and scholarships, but thinking that scholarships are there to recognize a student in some way for an achievement, if it be academic, leadership, athletics, arts, ROTC, you name it. A college or university can set these scholarships up for anything that they like, that they want to award in recognition of that achievement. It is important to understand that there may be some separate applications for these scholarships, and knowing when those applications are due and when they should be submitted is incredibly important to maintain that eligibility for those programs. On the other hand, typically falling into the need-based category, these grants are there to help students with financial need cover those educational costs. And so covering some of that cost of attendance to make the education accessible and affordable to them as much as they possibly can. Then here in the state of Maryland, a lot of great programs for Maryland residents. You do have to use it here in the state. You can't take it across state lines with you. But these are awarded on both need and merit basis. It is important to have the FAFSA filed prior to the deadline. They are very strict on this deadline, but you can check out the programs they have there at MHEC. But one that we always kind of try to point out are what are called the legislative scholarships. And so you see that link, the mdelect.net. Students can go in, put in their home address. It tells them who their local representatives are in the state legislature, and then contact them to get their application process for their specific funding sources. And so every senator and delegate in the state of Maryland has these funds to award to students for higher education. So we always recommend that students reach out to them to see what they have available. And I will say, for students that may have some financial need or high financial need, a couple of great need-based programs that are a part of the MHEC awards, as well as unique populations, students that want to be teachers. There's a teacher fellowship as well that allows to cover a lot of those educational expenses moving forward. And so a great place to start, I think, for those students. Both public and private institutions will participate in these. And so a lot of great opportunity for scholarship through the state of Maryland. The federal programs that we have here on hand, the Pell and SEOG, or Student Educational Opportunities Grant, are need-based programs. The Pell is specific to the FAFSA, that they dictate to us who is eligible based off the formulas they have kind of on the back end, while a Student Educational Opportunities Grant, or SEOG, is there, and it's what's considered a campus-based program. And so each college university develops their own policies as to who is eligible for that specific funding. The Teach Grant, also for those of you who may want to be teachers in the future, is there, but it does come with some very specific requirements associated with where and what you will teach in the future. Otherwise, it will be paid back. And so certainly something to talk to your financial aid administrators about when you get to that point. Work study programs, to work on campus or to work off campus, you do not necessarily have to be a part of the federal work study program. But if you are, it offers you the ability to earn funds to cover some of those indirect costs of the cost of attendance. So things like transportation and personal expenses. And the loan programs that are there. As soon as a student files the FAFSA form and we receive it, we're required to offer these student loan programs to the student. They are not by any means required to take them, but they are an option and an opportunity that is there for these students to have on hand. We'll talk a little bit more about that breakdown here in just a second. Outside scholarships. So we mentioned those outside programs, grant and scholarships that students can go through. Here are some resources. I know the CCICs at your high schools will have additional resources for you as well. But these outside scholarships are there that really it's going to be getting into finding these scholarships, having the ability to submit these applications, finding what you're eligible to receive, and submitting the applications and really just figuring out what you're going to receive. Unfortunately, you can't really rely on these and making that decision, because in a lot of cases, students don't know until after the deposit deadline during the summer what they may be eligible for, but certainly a great addition to anything that's already there on the table. And as I mentioned, the kind of loan types that are out there, I talked a little bit about those Stafford loans. Those are the federal direct lending programs and what the students have available to them, as well as the parents. But there's also those private source loans that are out there. And so you can reach out to your local bank, credit unions, educational lenders. We always recommend that the Stafford loan programs be the first look for families. It will be hard to beat the rates associated with those loans as well as the repayment options that are out there. That Parent Plus loan does come with an additional application for the parent. It is something that they will take out on behalf of the student to cover, excuse me, they will take out to support the student that is not available to be transferred to the student at a later date. So it will be their financing for the education. But really getting into kind of that subcategory of the student loans, two types of loans that we will offer a student, one being the subsidized, the other the unsubsidized student loan. The subsidized, as you can see there in green, a student must have financial needs. So coming back to that need calculation, a student is required to have financial need, and then we're able to offer this more or less interest-free loan while the student is enrolled in school. It does come with interest after they finish their education, but the ability for you to go through and take out this loan, have the deferment, and then interest start accruing at that point is incredibly beneficial to a lot of students. While on the other hand, the unsubsidized loan is available to everyone, regardless of financial need, but that interest does accrue on that loan while you're in school. And so we always recommend, if you can, a few bucks a month, pay down that interest to keep that principal steady while you're enrolled in school. And so I did see a couple of questions pop in. One that I will cover here in terms of how things may have changed. One of the things that we can do is go through this process called a special circumstances or professional judgment. Anything that may have changed that doesn't, you can't explain on the FAFSA because it really is mostly just dollar numbers. Giving us that information, reaching out to colleges, universities to say, hey, this has changed. What can I do to show how it's impacted us, either financially, in terms of our family life, any circumstances that have changed personally to go through. We will collect some additional information from you. But what this really does is allow us to go through and make the adjustments to the FAFSA to, in that case, award additional information to students, excuse me, additional funding to students through the information that we collect and that documentation as well to have in our records. And so really going through this process, reach out to those colleges, universities you're admitted to that you're thinking about attending and say, hey, this dollar amount or this change is significantly different from what it was a year ago. What can we do? What can you help me with? And we'll go through that process with you and be able to hopefully make those adjustments to be able to make the student eligible for additional aid moving forward. And we should, in almost all cases, the financial aid packages, receive those with everything that we know you are eligible to receive, if it be federal, state, institutional money, the loan programs, if there's anything else out there that they may have to be able to award, to give you the best idea of what the cost will actually be to you. Unfortunately, this year with the late FAFSA, we will not have packages out in some cases before the new year. I know a lot of small schools or rolling decision schools like to have those out within a week or two of the decision going out to students. But obviously, we have to wait on those as we get into the holiday season. The FAFSA information, when we do get it, we will have that and be able to do a release to the students as soon as we possibly can. There are some large colleges, universities that will wait until March, and they won't do it for anyone until kind of that mass release date for everyone once they have all their numbers figured out and have put all of those packages together. Because unlike a school like St. Mary's, where we have a couple of thousand, it is tens of thousands of applications and admissions that they have to package up for those students. And so a whole different animal and how they kind of put those pieces together. here are some great resources that are out there for you. And when I share these slides, the links will all be live. So getting in there, but studentaid.gov that I mentioned. So you're going to go in there to get your FSA ID, to file the FAFSA. There's some great resources in terms of the federal student aid estimator that is live for you to be able to use. There's college cost worksheets, guides in terms of next steps or timelines, things you should be thinking about. But one of the things that will be on every college university's website somewhere is this thing called a net price calculator. And it's really important to have because we want you to understand the difference of cost and net cost or net price. And so thinking about what we're actually going to charge you to be a student there and then subtracting out that gift aid that you've been awarded, if it be institutional scholarship, federal Pell Grant, outside scholarship, but you can figure out exactly what your out of pocket will be. This is what you will actually have to come up with in some way, if it be through the financing that's available, if it be through working on or off campus, payment plans, loans, going through the process, or those 529 plans that you have to be able to pay for those pieces. This is really important because that net cost is going to have a direct impact, obviously, on not only what you have to pay, but we know those choices that you make moving forward. And thinking about it in a way to be able to compare apples to apples as opposed to apples to some other crazy fruit, in that the cost of the education obviously has an impact, but the scholarships that a student receive um, can have more or less buying power based off of that cost. And so, in some cases, a $30,000 scholarship may not do as much as a $6,000 scholarship because of that starting price tag. And so, if your cost is $65,000 and you get a $30,000 scholarship, well, you still have to figure out $35,000 a year. On the other hand, if your starting cost is $28,000 and you get a $6,000 scholarship, well, now your starting price is only $22,000 per year. And so there is a significant difference in how that net cost kind of unfolds based off that starting direct cost to the student. And the other idea that obviously is a bit more subjective, but thinking about the value of the education. What are you gaining through the educational experience? What are you getting out of it? Really taking the time to look into things like programs. Is it something that I really want to do? A place that I want to be? Some place that I'm comfortable? Are they graduating students in 4 years? More often than they are 5 or 6 years. Because even if some place is slightly more expensive, but the ability to graduate in 4 years is there, obviously not paying 5 or 6 years of tuition has a great benefit in terms of that value proposition as well. So really just kind of thinking about all of those things as you're making those decisions. And the hope is that you file the FAFSA, you have the information, you have the full financial aid package, you have the time to make those decisions moving forward once you have everything kind of on the table, so to speak. And so, really kind of wrapping it all up, any other questions that you have, our email is there. Please let us know. But certainly, right now,
Well,
any other questions that you have here in the chat or that you'd like to ask out
I
loud?
have three.
Yeah.
Because not everybody does qualify for FAFSA. So I want to address the importance of people doing this, whether or not you think you're going to get money. One, I'm going to ask you, can a student get their own loan if they file the FAFSA that is just for them?
Yes, so every student that files the FAFSA, as I mentioned, we are required to offer these direct lending opportunities to them. Again, they don't have to take them, but they do have those federal student loans available to them. They can take all of it, they can take a portion of it, they can take one or the other if they have both available to them, but they are limited in the amount that we can offer. You mentioned, Kate, not everybody necessarily qualifies for need-based aid or whatever the case may be, but you don't really know until the FAFSA is on file. And so once you have it submitted, you have all the information there. You can submit it up to 20 colleges now in one go. At least do it that first year to know what your opportunities are. The Obviously cost differentials at different colleges, universities is going to make a major impact on what you're eligible for in terms of any sort of need-based aid, but certainly those other programs that are out there as well.
Thank you. All right, two more. One, and if you mentioned this already, I apologize. I had to step out for a second. Did you address Parent Plus loans? Because aren't those better loan rates than if they go outside and get private loans? But
I
they can
did
only do
briefly.
that.
Yeah, Parent Plus, federal student aid. That's where everything happens now. The former head of the Department of Education for Higher Education, the secretary there, came from Visa. So he was huge into customer experience, and they did a lot to make it much simpler for families. And so, studentaid.gov is where you're going to go for all of that. And yes, I do recommend the Plus loan through the Department of Ed. The interest rates on Plus loans in the private sector are somewhere around anywhere from 7 to 20%, which sounds absolutely crazy with the amount that some folks are taking. But this year they're around 9. They will go down for next year because the Fed cut rates earlier this year, and we expect them to do so in the latter half of this year, here in the next couple of months, at least hope so. But definitely again at the new year. So those are determined by the Department of Ed and Congress, and so they will set those for us. But we expect them to be somewhere in the 8% area for those next year.
And you have to apply for FAFSA to qualify for those, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
family must have a FAFSA on file to be eligible for the Parent Plus loan.
Okay. And third question. Okay, I get my offer, I get my financial aid back, and I don't like what I'm getting. Like I didn't do the FAFSA. Can I appeal that? I did not do the FAFSA and I don't like what they're giving me. Am I able to am I able to appeal that? Because I didn't do the FAFSA.
Yeah, the answer is yes. You can always ask. One of the things it does make it easy for us to make a decision with the FAFSA. But again, one of the and with a couple of questions that did pop in, one of the main answers that you will get from financial aid administrators in this arena is it depends. So it depends on the institution and what their policies are, how they will take those appeals for aid. If it is just straight up scholarship and they're looking for more money, then that can be the request. Here's my midterm grades, or here's my new SAT scores, or here's my new resume, and say, I believe I should be eligible for more because of these specific reasons. Or you have the financial aid, you do have the FAFSA on file, and you're like, I'm submitting a PJ because this crazy thing happened last year, and want to be able to really take everything into account and give us that information to say, yes, you know what, you're absolutely right. We can offer you an additional $1,000 in scholarship based off your new GPA or
Okay,
SATs or whatever the case may be.
thank you. Are the loans that you get fixed or adjustable? Or does
Through
it?
yeah, through the Department of Ed, they are fixed for the life of the loan with a little twist, a little asterisk or caveat. Each year, it is a new rate, and so that rate does change from year to year. So, if a student takes a loan their first year, that rate is fixed for the life of the loan. If they take a loan their second year, that rate is fixed for the life of the loan. So, if a student has a sub and an unsub each year for 4 years, technically they will have a portfolio of 8 separate loans. That being said, there is a consolidation process to bring all of those different programs together into an average rate for what the student took out while they were in school.
Thank you. And I'm assuming that if you have rental properties that you're earning income from, you're going to have to put that on the FAFSA.
Yes, any property that is not your primary residence will be accounted for. Yes.
Okay.
So it won't hurt your chances necessarily, but it will be accounted for within that calculation.
I mean, quite honestly, I haven't been doing financial aid certainly for as long as you, Rob, but I see families get money that I didn't expect them to, because they want the child, they want the student at their school. So they realize that in-state tuition is, quite a bit less. So a lot of schools will offer, substantial scholarships because they want the student to come there, even if the parents don't necessarily need it.
Oh, absolutely. And scholarship is a whole different animal. There are schools that offer, discounts upwards of 80 and 90% to students where, the price tag is $80,000, but the student is only paying 15,000 a year. And so, or I should say the family of the student are paying that. And so, it really is fully determinant on the institution, their policies and how they put their packages together, what their goals may be as an institution. Right now, a lot of schools may be wanting to grow their out-of-state populations, and so you could
Mhm.
get a an offer from a Virginia school for a lot of dollars in terms of scholarship because they want to bring you across state lines.
Somebody was asking if the rental property itself comes, you have to claim that or just the income? I believe it's both.
It's going to be anything you've made as well as the equity on the rental property.
Okay, how about equity in the primary home? They just keep coming in.
No, equity. So not on the FAFSA form, but it does account for it on the CSS profile. Like I said, it does dig a little bit deeper into those personal finances where they expect you to use anything at your disposal to pay for the education.
Thank you. Any other questions? These are all great. And as I said at the beginning, I have recorded this. So if you came in late, it will be posted on my YouTube site and it will be shared with all 25 high school CCICs. So
So I did get a couple of direct messages here about financial aid consortium in the DMV region. We don't have anything specifically. There are some schools between Virginia and Maryland that are part of the academic common market. And so that means if there is a program, for instance, if a student would like to go to a school in Virginia, they would have to be participating in a program that is not available in their home state, in which case they could be eligible for the in-state rate at a public institution. I will say, just for clarification, private schools have one tuition rate. They charge everybody the same thing. Public schools are the only ones that have separate rates in terms of in-state and out-of-state. So if it's a private school, it's going to be one cost for everybody anyway. If it is a public school and you are participating in the academic common market, or that school participates in the academic common market and you're participating in a program that's not available in your home state, you could then qualify for in-state tuition at that point.
thank you. Sorry, I was responding to a direct message.
Sure.
Somebody asked me if I wanted to share my YouTube channel. If you're bored and you have nothing to do, I am more than happy. I just have to look it up and I'll put it in the chat. But I do a lot of workshops over the summer and over the years, and so I decided to start this channel, and I was on there today looking to see if anybody ever watched them, and actually they do, some of them. So especially the UMD one this year, that was a huge hit. Um,
So
okay,
you're saying we're going to be YouTube famous now?
we're going to be YouTube famous. Yes,
Fantastic. So it's
absolutely.
funny, a question popped in, and I have never had as many questions concerning this particular point of the application before as I have this year. And it all stems around this idea of the question on the Common App of, are you applying for financial aid? Um, the reality of the situation is schools do want to know. In 98% of instances, it's not going to impact your ability to be admitted to an institution. The vast majority of schools are what are called need blind schools. If you're qualified to come, we're going to take you. Um, that's really what it comes down to. In most places, in most places, being able to meet those admission qualifications is the most important part. If you're applying for financial aid or not, they may just want to know if they should expect a FAFSA, so we can do outreach. So you said, hey, you said on your application you're applying for financial aid. We don't have your FAFSA form yet, or we don't have your CSS. Would you get that into us so we can put a package together for you? So I really want to take out of the minds of parents and students right now that this is going to impact their admissions ability because they said that they would possibly be applying for financial aid or would like to apply for financial aid. Because in reality, based off your FAFSA information and the school that you're applying to, you may not be eligible for any need-based aid, and so that is not going to make the biggest impact for any by any means. Certainly not the sole impact on your decision.
All right.
Still recommend everybody submit the FAFSA, but
So okay, I found my channel. For your viewing pleasure. Okay, so I just want to reiterate that it is important for everybody to do it. And I will tell you, in addition to supporting your kids, we are being pushed by the state of Maryland to get everybody to do their FAFSA. I can't make anybody do it. All I can say is I'm trying. So just, humor me. And, if you really don't want to do it, we can't make you do it. But the state of Maryland keeps telling us that there's so much money that is going unused and they want that money to be used. And
Absolutely.
I don't know everybody's financial situation, obviously, so I can't target the people that I think would get the money. And quite honestly, I don't know who would get the money. So, all I say is if there's money that's going unused, maybe there's a chance you'll get some. Because they do want it to be used, because I talked to a woman who is in charge of this in Annapolis, who interviewed me and wanted to know why this money wasn't being used. And she said, bottom line is we just want the money to be used. So please fill it out. We will be doing workshops showing you how to fill out the FAFSA once it opens in December. All of our schools are doing workshops. So if you're not part of BCC, check with your counselor or your college advisor, the person that does my job. You all have one in your schools. And I am going to put my email in the chat so that if you're not sure who your CCIC is, just email me and I will tell you who that person is. And Rob, when I'm done, you can put your information in here as well if you didn't already.
Just submitted it. There we go.
Okay. You can't submit the FAFSA until the child is a senior in high school.
Correct.
Till they're applying for college. That's not something you can do ahead of time.
Right. It is year specific. And so you'll file it for a specific academic year.
And right now we were filing for the 20, or we will be for the 25-26 school year. I had a kid come in yesterday, told me it was all done. I said, great, you did the 24-25.
Right.
Now you've got good practice and you're ready to go. All right. So thank you, Rob, so much for doing all of these. We really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. I'll stop this.